What's up, you guys? Today's episode, we're going to be teaching you how to do the EQs on a Bajoquinto, and let's get started with it. Per usual, the first thing I do on any instrument is I get the volume level to about negative 18, as always. And then from there, we're going to go into our EQ. What I'm going to do is I'm going to raise up the Bajoquinto a little bit on this one so you can hear the changes that I'm making to it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to start with is going to be the EQ on it. What I do with it, like I said on the previous video, on every instrument, every voice, just about everything, I add a low cut. Just depends where I'm going to add it to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hear, so I find that sweet spot right now where it takes out some of the low end, but not too much of it, to the point where the Bajoquinto is starting to sound really dry. Alright, now we're going to start working our way on it right now once it starts up again. This right here can differ if your Bajoquinto player likes to add the bajos to it. If they add the bajos, you don't want to take out too much because then you're going to lose that low end on the bajo. I think right there about the 120-ish is about the perfect mark for me. It kind of already follows the curve of the pickup already. It's just not too much. Now our next frequency we're going to do is we're going to go to our low frequency. Per usual, the way I find my frequency is I bump up the gain to about positive 10, put a tight Q on it, just so I could hear just certain frequencies in that, like a tight area, and then just kind of sweep until I find a spot that I don't like. And now we're going to sweep from about that 120-ish mark to about 250, maybe 300. We're trying to find a frequency that we don't like in there, and that's what we're going to clean up. As you can see right here, for some reason this Bajoquinto pickup at that 200 hertz really tends to linger around. So what I tend to do on this quinto, around that 200 mark, I usually drop that. Not too much to the point where it's like really dry, just a bit, usually about negative maybe 3 to about -4, depending on the location and how it's affecting the room. If you drop it too much, it'll start to sound like this. You're basically taking out all the low end on it, and it doesn't sound really good anymore. I'll do a -3.5, and what I'm gonna do is slightly open up the Q just a bit to about that's about 5.86. Make sure it doesn't let you get exact spots. So we're gonna go with that for that section. Now our next section is gonna be our low mids, and same thing, raise it up to about 10, because if you do it too much, you're gonna get that cup effect. And same thing, laying up the band. And now we're gonna start looking for our next frequency that I'm not really too much of a fan of. I'm kind of liking this frequency right here, just because it has a little warmth to it. But I did notice around the 6 to 800 hertz, right there, it kind of gives it like, how can I explain it? Like a cup effect, kind of like it's muffling it. So in that spot, I'm gonna take that out a bit. This one I'm gonna go a little harsher, and then I'm gonna open up the curve more. That right there sounds really good to me. And now the next one is gonna be our high mids. In this section, depending on how you want your quinto to sound, if you want to sound bright, you could add, or if you want the quinto to sound warm, then you reduce on it. And you can also look for that buzzing sound of the strings, so you can have that little effect to them too around here. I'm liking this spot right here. Like the rasgueo from the pick, it's not too bright. It has a little bit of warmth to it. And it's making the quinto sound pretty nice here. Bring it down just a bit. Let's do, I'll say about negative, positive 3 sounds. And then I'm gonna widen it up so I can warm it up a little bit. Okay. And now, for my last one, what I like to do on the last band where the high section is I like to do a high shelf. And that high shelf, I usually start it around maybe 6,000 hertz to about 8,000 hertz. And I just give it a little bit between 1.5 to about maybe +3. And that's just to add that little bit of brightness on top of the sound already. Right here at +3, and I'm slowly gonna make my way back to about maybe between 4 to 6K, maybe 4 to 8K, just until I find a spot that sounds nice to my ears. I'm liking it about right around 4,500, 4,006. I like about the 4.5 to about 5 mark is where I'm liking it at. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring it down just slightly. Now for me, the quinto is sounding bright but not too overpowering right now. It actually sounds pretty nice, and I would leave it around there. If you want, you could still bring up the low end just a bit so that you can clear out a little bit more of the lows that it might be picking up the pickup. But like I said, you gotta be careful with somebody that plays bajos, because then you'll take out all the low of it. And now our next step is gonna be to go into the dynamics. Okay, so my ratio is always about 2.5 to maybe 4. And when it comes to like bajoquintos, I like to have the knee between a 1 and a 2. I usually don't do 0 because then it cuts out a little too much of the pick sound, and I kind of like the little harshness from it. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find my threshold right now. Okay, so now as you can see, it's starting to blink in between that about -2 through. So what it's starting to do is starting to reduce it just ever so slightly. And usually when it takes out those little picks is where the guy's strumming a little bit harder than the previous note. So for me, I want to go just a little bit more. So you can see it kind of keeps going right by that too. And then when it's like a really hard pick or a really hard rasgueo is when it goes a little bit more todavía. Okay. And now my attack. I don't want to take out the complete sound of the pick right away. I kind of want it to have a little bit of harshness to it. So I'll actually turn back the attack so it's not so quick of an attack right away. Okay, so now for the hold, I tend to have it really low when it comes to the bajoquinto or guitars, especially if it's like a requinto or somebody that's playing melody. They're gonna constantly be picking at it, and so I don't want it to go too much into next transients or into next notes and delay too much of the sound. So for my hold, I'm probably gonna be around. I like that point 3. It's just slightly going into the next one, but not taking it out completely. And now for the release, bring this up. This is too quick. Holding it a little too long in my liking. Bring it down just a bit. And that's with my hold. Bring my threshold up a little bit. Just right here. And now the last step on this one is going to be to bring up the gain. What I usually do is if I have the ratio at about 2.5 or 3, okay, so we're going to do 3 right now. A lot of guys like to say go straight to the 3. Not really needed to. Honestly, it depends on if you feel like the sound got really, really compressed or taken down, reduced a lot. In this case, I feel like it's not too much, so maybe even with just a +2, it'll be back to about where I liked it or where the volume was good enough. Okay, we're gonna wait for it to start back up again, and I'm gonna raise up the gain on it. I'm gonna do a 2.5. I feel like that's enough where it's not too much. And bring this up just a hair right there. Now the next step I'm gonna do is my gates. When it comes to the gate, you don't want to be too fast, because if the gate's too fast, it's not gonna let the strings ring. And if you're not giving them the chance to ring, if the guy is doing like a solo or playing a melody, you're gonna kind of cut out his parts and it's gonna sound really, really choppy. So for the guitars, if they're like an armonía or like a requinto, sometimes the requintos I hold a lot more compared to the armonías. The armonía, I kind of go with like, I go with the vibe of the song. If it's a faster song, I'll put the hold a little bit less. If it's a song that's going pretty slow, I'll give it a longer hold just so that the guitar can resonate with it. And I do the same thing with the quintos and bajo sextos. So now we're gonna find our sweet spot. What you could do is you could just bump up the threshold pretty high to see where it starts cutting out and start working your way from there, or you could raise it up little by little. Okay, now we're gonna start working on our gate now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring up my threshold gently to see where it starts cutting. Now you can see that the light is starting to blink red right here, and now we're starting to cut out a little bit of the signal on it. If we go too much, it'll start turning it off. See, it sounds like it's distorted, but what's happening is it's cutting it too quick. So we're actually gonna bring it down. A little bit less. I'm liking around this 48 right here. And what I do on the instruments is I usually bring the range up to about 51, 50-ish. Just because if you go too low on the range, on a part that's kind of quiet and it's trying to hop back in, it's going to take too long and it's not going to hear that next part. So now what we're going to do here is we're going to find our attack that works for me. Like I said, you kind of want it to hold off a little bit. You don't want it to completely kill the sound out right away. I feel like right there's a good spot. It's like a game of cat and mouse between that threshold and that red light. So now what we're gonna do, we're gonna find our hold next. All right, now we're gonna start working on the hold. Like I said, you could give it a little bit of length here. You could give it a longer hold. It's just so that the guitar could vibrate and actually give it sound that it's supposed to, so it sounds more natural. I think we're gonna be around this 252. And then now we're gonna start working on our release. If you have the release too quick, it's gonna make it sound really unnatural, really choppy. Sometimes you need to just lower it or bring it back a bit to a greater value so it can give that guitar a natural sound. As you can see, that red light is barely coming in between notes, which I'm actually liking because that's, if you were to hear a guitar in person, it's like the person's naturally, how can I say it, muting it a little bit. But right now our gate's not overkill to the point where it's chopping out all the sound of it. We're gonna do the hold a little bit longer, and we're gonna wait for like that last part of the song where it kind of resonates just the guitar right here. That's a perfect one for me right there. It followed along with it, kind of went with the music. And now we're gonna work on our last step. Our last step for me is gonna be adding the effects. The effects I use are gonna be the same effects that I used in the accordion video, which are going to be a plate, and then the second one is a vintage reverb slash like hall sound. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bump up the quinto pretty high right now, just so you can hear how each effect is affecting that sound. This first one, like I said, is gonna be the plate. So if you're really listening to that effect, what it's doing is giving it a pretty bright like top end to it, and it's also giving it a bit of a kind of a reverb slash delay to it. Not so much delay, but more of a reverb. But it's making it smooth and kind of coursed out, but it is adding some high ends to it, which we're gonna bring down for now. And then I'm gonna let you guys hear the second effect, which is the vintage reverb slash hall. Let's just go back to the beginning real quick. This one's adding a little bit of warmth to it, but it still does have a pretty bright top end. So if you go too much with both of them, your highs are going to be very, very echoey. And if the room already has too much echo, it's going to sound really harsh on the ears. And if you add too much of these can also make the room sound very, how can I put it to you? Very boomy, very muddy sounding. So you got to play it kind of smooth with them. So we're going to turn it off and we're going to adjust the two just to enough to where I feel like is what I would rock it. So for me, that's the perfect amount of effect. It's not too much, but it still sounds natural. It gives a slight, just an ever so slight reverb. And like I said, it's sounding natural, like if it was playing in, because you could say like if it was playing in a church or a room made of brick or concrete, it wouldn't have that natural reverby sound to it. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring up the rest of the mix. The drums and the bass and the rest of the instruments are not EQ'd. The only one that are EQ'd right now is the accordion and the quinto, and I'm gonna mash them just a bit together so you can hear it, how they would sound in unison. And I'm just gonna bring up a little bit of the bass. And that's it for today's tutorial. I didn't want to make it too complicated. It's pretty simple, pretty easy to follow my steps. Like I said, I really don't do too much to the quinto. You can see my EQs are right here and the RTAs are going right underneath it. All I did was just cleared up the low end a little bit and that one frequency that tends to stick around, and then gave it a little bit of brightness by bumping up around that, 2.5. Depending on the quinto that you have, it might be between 1.5 to about 3.5, maybe 4K. And that is like the little sweet spot. You just gotta find that spot that you like. I usually like around that 2K because that's where it usually has the sound of the strings kind of like buzzing to them. And then the next step is just give it a little bit of a high shelf. Nothing too crazy. It's just a little bit, just to add a little bit crispiness to it. And then, like I said, because my effects are pretty low, I don't keep those really high because then it could make the guitar sound a little too muddy, a little overkilled. I want it to sound natural. I don't want it to sound too crazy. And then, like I said, same thing for the gates. When the gates are there, I want them to just kind of go along with the sound. I don't want them chopping out the sound quicker than they need to. I want them following it and going smooth with the cut. And that's it. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. And if you can, do me a favor, give the video a like and also follow the channel. I appreciate it very much. Thank you guys.